Good afternoon and welcome to Webinar Wednesday. We are excited to have over 250 registered attendees for today's webinar, which is eligible for 1 credit from the ACI. Let's get started by giving one lucky attendee a Webinar Wednesday lunch bag for answering this trivia question. Name the music legend that also hails from New Jersey and is also known as the Boss. Answer now using the questions feature on your dashboard. While you're answering, I want to invite everyone to our full MD Expo conference, which will bring HTM professionals from across the nation to Seattle, October 5th to 7th for 3 days of learning, networking, and the latest advances in technology, products, and services. Details can be found at mdexposhow.com/Seattle. Okay, let's see who our winner is, and congratulations to, where we go, Sandy Mason. Sandy, congratulations. The correct answer is Bruce Springsteen. Webinar Wednesday would like to thank our sponsor, Nuvolo. Nuvolo is a modern cloud-based EAM platform that meets the highest standards for ease of use, performance, and online and offline mobility capability for managing clinical equipment for healthcare providers. Visit nuvolo.com for more information. Our presenter today is Ben Pearson, Senior Director of Solution Consulting at Nuvolo. Ben, you may begin whenever you are ready.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And thanks everyone for joining today. And I'm looking forward to the conversation around this single platform for healthcare lines of business and ultimately extending, for facilities lines of business within hospitals. And as we look at the overall solution, when we walk into a hospital and a healthcare organization, there's a number of lines of business that we're speaking with that ultimately can take advantage of our Nuvolo platform. And when we think about it, it's not just one group, it's not just facilities or HTM, it's also areas like environmental health and safety, it's the nutrition and services group, it's your linens team, it's also your pharmacy, that all have assets that need to be managed and tracked and maintained within a healthcare organization. And just to note, at Nuvolo we have over 775 healthcare facilities that are using our Nuvolo platform for managing their key facilities assets, in addition to other areas like healthcare technology management. Just to give a quick overview, Nuvolo's facilities enterprise asset management really is extending into all areas of the facilities business. And when we look at the facilities business, there's specific areas that need to be addressed. There's areas like maintenance management, and maintenance management for us is asset work order management. It's your PM scheduling. That's the core, and then we think of that as a foundation for most facilities organizations. The other areas of the portfolio also include things like space and move management. So where are people sitting, dealing with things like onboarding of employees and allocation of those people to desks and cubicles and office space. And with Nuvolo, we have a native integration to AutoCAD and other CAD programs like Revit, BIM, and others to be able to bring those floor plans, that space data, the polylines, the layer data directly into the platform and engage with that information to be able to actually interact with it. Where are my assets on the floor? Being able to deal with large group moves across the organization and other use cases. Where's work orders across the floor or an environment? Additionally, we have capital program and project management, which is designed for construction projects, purpose-built for areas like building new healthcare buildings, doing renovations within a healthcare organization, and other use cases as well. Maybe you're bringing in a large medical device into the hospital that requires coordination across facilities to get a room set up, to get the medical device set up and configured by your HTM teams, getting IT involved if it's an IP-enabled device, etc. So other use cases are also leveraging that. Real estate management covers areas like if you're leasing out locations or if you are leasing space, being able to actually track and manage the space and along with the leases that you have in those environments. And lastly, it's about energy and sustainability management. Where are you utilizing different energy usage across your environment and your buildings, and understanding where that energy is going to. So again, covering the full portfolio, that's the scope of what we cover as part of our solution set. One example I want to speak about just for a minute is Children's Health down in Dallas. We have other examples very similar to this, where the organization actually looked to where there's opportunities to consolidate applications across the environment. They actually had over 47 applications across the clinical business, the facilities business, their linens, the nutrition services group, their pharmacy, and many, many more that had assets that needed to be tracked and managed and maintained. And they actually looked at how do we consolidate that so all of our teams ultimately can work together. One advantage in this now was process efficiency. In a number of cases, multiple groups would need to be involved in performing work. Simple examples would be maybe a chiller involved with an imaging device. Well, I may need to get facilities involved, or I may need to have clinical involved to be able to co-work on that same piece of equipment, depending on the various use cases. There's a lot of other scenarios like that where I need multiple teams involved that may be in a different line of business. And by consolidating all of my applications into a single platform, I now can collaborate across lines of business, pass work between lines of business, without having to pick up the phone, without having to open a ticket in a separate system. They were able to take advantage of that. A couple other examples of process efficiency that they were able to see through that change was also consolidating call centers. They had over 20 call centers across their various lines of business. So if I'm a staff member, a nurse, a doctor, and I need to get support, they now have one phone number to call with different options. They press 1 for clinical or HTM, 2 for facilities, et cetera. And there's a huge benefit in time saving that now that staff member can put that time back to patient care and less time trying to get support. So that was a major transformation that they went through, along with cost savings. If you think about the cost associated with 47 applications, that's including server, storage, infrastructure, not to mention the software and licensing and all the rest. Huge cost savings that they were able to see and glean. Over $1 million was able to be saved there. And again, from a reporting and analytics perspective, now all of a sudden your executive team, your C-suite, even your leadership and your managers and directors have one place to go to actually see how things are running from a operations perspective. How are we doing in terms of our workloading, our work orders, et cetera? How are we doing in terms of our financials as we're tracking parts usage, as we're tracking labor across our various teams? And ultimately, compliance. How are we able to respond to a joint commission audit? How do we handle environment of care reporting, right? Being able to have that data at your fingertips in real time, so you don't have to extract data from multiple systems to figure out in spreadsheets or access databases, how do you actually respond to an audit or respond to an issue. So those are just a few examples. There's many more other benefits that they saw, but just wanted to share a few examples of how they transformed their business, moving to Nuvolo, and ultimately some of those benefits that they saw across their various lines of business. So the need for healthcare technology management and facilities alignment. So some of the challenges that I mentioned earlier is understanding, when a customer has a problem, is that problem a HTM issue? Is that problem a facilities issue? Maybe is that problem an IT issue or other group? Is sometimes difficult to determine from your call centers or your employees themselves. So being able to understand how you can pass work seamlessly between groups, and I'll demonstrate that here in a little bit on how that actually works. It's really important. And other areas that we're seeing is in more legacy CMMS or asset management systems, we're seeing that configurations can sometimes be challenging or very expensive and time consuming. Sometimes even the children's health example, they actually had to call their vendor every time they wanted to have a report created or a form or a field changed, and that ultimately cost thousands of dollars, right? In this case, they wanted to click to configure architecture that they could do themselves and self-maintain themselves. And they don't want to have to be heavily reliant on IT. They want to be able to do that themselves. And then lastly, being able to have a mobile experience and reporting so that now from a mobile perspective, their technicians can operate in the field, tracking their work, what they did, updating asset information, performing PMs, et cetera, on a native mobile platform that I'll show here in just a minute. So there's some of the examples of areas that they saw and challenges they saw and areas that we were able to address. So when you think about that single system of record, but also that single system of engagement, we talked about how we've transformed bringing call centers together, bringing teams together, and ultimately the benefit now goes back to your employees, your clinicians, the staff, et cetera, because now they can interact through a single platform, whether it be a clinical asset, a facilities asset, or an IT asset. So lots of opportunity there in terms of being able to engage your various groups as you go through that process. When we think about improving that clinician experience, it's also about that self-service portal. I'll demonstrate that here in just a minute and actually show you how easy that is to request support from one of your lines of business, and ultimately everyone's working in the same system. And this again is a configurable self-service portal that we can actually tailor to your business. It can actually be configured based on the needs and groups that you want involved to be able to request support. So increasing technician efficiencies. So how do we route work orders to the correct team? One of the things that we want to be able to automate is being able to get work to the right place at the right time based on what the issue is. And there's a number of ways that that you can look at this. And the things are areas like how, where is this coming from in terms of the site, but also what is the asset type? Is it a facilities device? Is it an imaging device? Is it a clinical device, et cetera? But being able to now take it to the next levels and auto routing work to the correct team. And those teams could be internal organizations, but they also could be third-party vendors and suppliers if you've outsourced to them as well. So having that ability is really important and be able to drive that technician efficiency. I'm actually going to jump in and show the mobile platform for just a second and just give you a look at how that actually operates. And we're going to talk about a few different areas here within mobile. So I'll bring it up here on the screen and we'll jump right in. So if I'm a technician, and I'm turned on both clinical and facilities in our mobile application, I'm on an iPad here, but it works on Android and Windows as well. I can actually come in, let me actually look at my clinical dashboard for a minute. As a technician, I can actually see all the various work that I may have going on. Let me just refresh my screen 1 second. Apologies, live demos. What I'm going to show you is actually how we pass work between the two groups. So I'm in my clinical dashboard here. Let me actually come in here so you can see that. Apologies. Give me 1 second. Try that one more time. And I may come back to that if I have an issue technically with getting that to share. So 1 second. Okay, I'm going to jump back to that as we go on. I'll get that looking at in a second. From a reporting perspective, also being able to route that work. Where are we actually routing our work? And also not only routing the work, but also our timestamps of routing that work as it goes through the process. One of the common things that we see is how long is it taking for each phase of the process of routing work, meaning it was submitted at this time, but also when did someone pick it up? What's the timestamp between that? And ultimately, when does the work start? And ultimately, when does that work complete? Being able to actually timestamp each phase of that service is something that we look at from a reporting perspective, but also looking at things like bounces of work between groups and understanding of has works routed around the organization, how many times does a work order change hands or change teams, and being able to track that from a reporting perspective is very important. So a couple of things we'll dive into here. I actually want to jump in. Let's jump into the platform right now, and I want to show you a little bit about what we have when it comes to a couple different areas. So we talked about the ability to do self-service portal, and so you're actually looking at the portal here today, and this is, like I mentioned earlier, completely configurable. So if I'm an employee or a staff member within a hospital, being able to actually report a problem based on what's coming in. So if it's a facilities issue or if it's a clinical issue, let's go into facilities today. I can be presented with a number of options that I can report a problem against. Whether that be any number of areas. Maybe it's a custodial problem, maybe it's a safety issue, maybe it's a repair of a device, but it could be other areas as well related to what the problem is. And as I'm looking at my devices and being able to understand what the problem is, I'm presented with a simple form that I can actually notice if is this a problem at a space or is this a problem with an asset that I'm working with. And we do support things like RFID. So if you use radio frequency ID or RTLS systems, we actually automatically track where's that asset at. And we commonly interface with systems like Centrac and Stanley AeroScout and others. So I'll go ahead and put in an asset tag here for a minute. You'll notice that when I put in an asset tag, it actually shows me the related work within the last period of 30 days that are open and that are break-fix work orders. And what we're trying to avoid is duplicate work being created for the same issue potentially. So if there's a light out in a room, or if there's an issue with a medical device in this particular location, being able to notify that person that's putting in their support request that someone else, maybe from another shift, has also put in that same problem and duplicate issue. So I'll go ahead and report a problem here. And based on where this asset is located, based on the location it's reporting against, we'll auto route this work to the appropriate crew or appropriate assignment group so that now that technician gets that work assigned. A couple other things I'll also mention as we're in here is we can not only report a problem via a form, we also can report a problem based on an actual floor map. As I mentioned earlier, we have a native CAD integration capability. So if you have your CAD drawings and you have your floor maps, we can natively bring those into the system and automatically update those as those are being modified or changed. So let's go ahead and bring up a floor plan here for a minute. And those floor plans, we can select our floor that we're working with. And the value here is if I can actually allow somebody just to pinpoint where the problem is actually at on the floor, if they can identify exactly where they're physically at, they can save me time in trying to actually locate where the problem is. So if they know that they're in a particular, maybe they are in the imaging wing of the hospital, they can actually pinpoint their problem directly on the floor to actually drop a pin on that floor of where they're actually having a problem. Very powerful feature. Again, now your technicians can actually see on a floor as they're doing rounds, as they're working their work orders, they know the other work that may be around them that they can support while they're in that particular area of one of your hospitals. A couple other things we'll jump into next as we're going through this. And I'll see if I can get mobile back up here in just a second. So bear with me on that. Apologies on that. There we go. Looks like it's back up. Let's see if we can get that to load up here. If I can't get that up, we'll show a different method. So as we're bringing that up, certainly if there's questions coming in, we'll take those as well. But let's go ahead and let's jump into one other area. We talked about being able to pass work. So let me go ahead and bring open a work order here for a minute just to talk about that for just a second. So with our application set, you'll notice that I have a menu for my facilities business to work out of. We also have a menu for clinical or HTM to work out of as well. So it is segmented so that each group can work independently, but collaborate in the exact same platform. So let me bring open a work order here just to talk about that for just a minute and talk about how work can actually get passed. So here's this work order. Actually, this is the one that we just submitted via self-service. You'll notice it auto-routed to a particular technician here. So let me just bring this up for just a second. A couple things you'll notice is that we do have the ability to flag work as under contract. So if it has a warranty, if it's under warranty, we can auto flag that. And we can actually notify the technician that this is under contract. Or if you're paying for a third party to be able to support that, we have that ability as well to notify it's under contract. If, for example, I'm working this facility's work order and I notice that this is actually a clinical problem, I need to route this, I can actually automatically click a link to convert this work order and transfer this work order directly to my clinical organization. So we have that ability on both the browser and in the mobile application that allows us both from either direction to pass work between various teams and various lines of business. It looks like there may be a question coming in. If there is, I can pause for a second.
Yeah, Ben.
Yes, sorry, Andrew, you go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Linda. The first question, Ben, is does your CAD integration also feed into a task list or a punch list?
Okay, in terms of, so I'll have to understand exactly their use case, but as part of, so the CAD integration brings all of the CAD itself data in. So if you have a punch list, I'd have to understand exactly the use case. In our capital program and project management module, we do have the ability to track punch lists and track the costs associated with those punch lists and the work that's being done across those punch lists. We think of that more as a task set. So I guess I'd have to understand that a little bit more. If you're looking to flag where on a floor plan do you have issues? So that may be where that question is going from. That's actually probably where that question is going from. So let me just bring up a floor map here for just a minute and show you that and how that could be leveraged. So I'll bring up this floor plan right now and we'll talk about that for just a minute. So if you've identified punch list locations on a floor plan, so we absolutely can bring that data in. So if you've identified, for example, there's a punch here and in different rooms on the floor, we can actually identify that. We can even bring that punch list data in if you have a separate layer potentially for that. You can also bring that layer in as well. You'll notice I'm hovering over the layers here. It doesn't have a lot of layers. It has zones, locations, and a floor. But if you did have a layer for, maybe you had a layer for your fire extinguishers, maybe you had a layer for your punch list data, we absolutely could bring that in as well if it's in CAD. Yeah. Hopefully that answered the question.
Okay, Ben, we have one following on from that. Can you track if there are large numbers of work orders being transferred from clinical to facilities to IT?
We absolutely can. So when we transfer work orders, we actually build a parent-child relationship between those two work orders. So from a reporting perspective, I can actually show how many work orders have transferred because there's that relationship between facilities to clinical or clinical to facilities or to IT. We absolutely know every work order that has a parent-child relationship and can report against that to show all of that transferring of work between groups. Yeah, we sure can. Great. Was there any other questions while I'm pausing for a second on that?
Not at the moment, thanks.
Okay, great. Apologies on my mobile. I will. We may need to come back on that, Andrew. So we'll. Oh, here we go. Perfect. So let me just quickly show mobile. Apologies on the technical difficulties on the demo there. But let me go ahead and bring open. Let's see if this is going to demo here. So we'll go ahead and bring open my. Apologies. Looks like I'm not going to be able to show that. I'll come back to that, Andrew, again. Sorry for the demo on that. We'll maybe follow up with the folks here, and we'll get you another demo of our mobile application. Just my technical difficulty here. Apologies for that. Any other questions while I'm bringing that up?
Not from my end.
Okay, great. All right, so let's. So that's one example. A couple other things I want to show while we're in here is also. Let's see if that does come up. Sorry. One last try for good luck. We'll see if we can get it to go. Okay, we're going to go ahead and pass on that today. Sorry about that, everyone. Okay, so let's talk for a minute about reporting and analytics as well. So let's actually look at some of our reports and analytics across both facilities and clinical, and bring that up on the screen here. So when we look at reporting analytics, you'll notice here I'm bringing up a dashboard, and this dashboard is actually going to have both facilities and clinical. You'll notice together in this dashboard, because we can actually combine the reports across your various lines of business in a single dashboard. So you don't have to have separate applications or separate reporting engines to be able to handle those reports. So a couple of reports here. I'm actually in the clinical tab right now. You'll notice that we can actually watch things like PM % closed and complete. We do have out of the box the ability to watch your PM completion, but also your PM compliance. That's also taking into account things the Joint Commission are going to look for around devices that are unable to locate, being able to also note if the devices, the room, for example, was unavailable. So we have the ability to track that. We also have the ability to track forecasting of parts and labor. So as part of our planned maintenance forecasting and actual scheduling module, we have the ability to actually take those planned maintenance schedules and identify the parts required, for example, as part of our PM scheduler, but also the skills and the labor required as part of our PM scheduler. So because of that, we actually can forecast out your labor requirements needed to be able to perform those upcoming PMs, but also be able to see the parts required, so you can do things like part kitting in advance before you actually perform those PMs. So that's a nice feature. The common other reports are things like, what's the state of all of your equipment in your environment? Maybe you're looking at those labor reports, so being able to actually see labor hours being used, actual labor being actually worked. So you can actually look at things like productivity reporting as well. Maybe we want, if you've outsourced, what's your service mix? Where are you sending your work to, right? Maybe it's HIPAA, looking at HIPAA status. So we actually do have the ability to track HIPAA data associated with your devices. So does it store HIPAA data? Does it transmit HIPAA data? So we have the ability to track that across your device fleet and many, many other areas. So we have over 100 reports within clinical. Same is true for facilities. So facilities tracking, again, is also looking at all of your facilities data. So as we talked earlier, some of the same types of reports are here as well, but being able to actually watch things like maybe upcoming forecast by technician for PMs that are upcoming. So load leveling across my group, et cetera. So that's a quick look at reporting. I'm going to take one other try at my mobile. So I would like to show you that today. I do, again, I very much apologize on that, and we'll see if we can get that screen showing for you all today. So give me 1 second.
Hey Ben, I have got another question for you. It's where is it? Hang on a second, I lost it. Can this be used for environmental rounding? We do rounding in our facilities, and as we find issues, we have applications that we note those in, and then someone else creates a work order.
Yes, so we absolutely do support rounding use cases. So being and part of our PM scheduling allows you to actually schedule those PMs for an area or a location that includes rounds. And by the way, as part of our mobile, actually I'll show that right now. So you can see my mobile hopefully on the screen. I'm using a different technology, so we'll make that work. Apologies again on that. So we actually, as part of our work order management, let me actually bring up a work order here so we can talk specifically about that use case. We actually can leverage things like checklists as part of our work orders. So things like rounding checklists, we support, and we can also identify, as we're doing those checklists, if there's a failure, automating the actual corrective work order for that and routing it to the appropriate group. So if you find an issue as you're doing inspections, as you're walking around and looking and inspecting areas, you actually can auto trigger a work order against that. So let me bring up a work order here. Let's take a look at one of these. So I've got a good example here. So first of all, I'm in a work order right now. Let me actually turn this horizontal. I think it'll view a little bit easier. There we go. So now you can see I'm in my mobile. I'm looking at a work order. A couple things you'll notice, I can actually see my contract coverage right here as well. So I can actually see who's under contract, who do I contact at the vendor if I need to get a hold of somebody. But from that checklisting perspective, from a rounds perspective, let me see if I have another checklist so I can demo for that. Let me give me 1 second. Let me grab one example here. See if I have a better one. If I have one, I'll show it to you. I don't have a quick one there. Let's see. Apologies on that. Let's see. But to quickly answer that question, yes, we do. So I'll find one more that has a good checklist for you, and we'll show that as well. A couple other things on our mobile application. Yeah, go ahead. Another question coming in?
Yeah, I've got a question that says, can you discuss the security level abilities for each field in all the different tables? Mm-hmm. Can we, for instance, have different levels of access to fields, have different groups created, which would give varying read write to each field independently across all tables?
Yep, great question. I like the technical question. The answer is yes. So the security is at a field level access control. So the way access control is set up is obviously we have users that are logging in. Typically Active Directory is how they're coming in. So we have a native AD integration. And then once they're authenticated to the system, we leverage groups and roles. So roles are applied to groups, and we're putting permissions in those groups. So based on their role, and they can have multiple roles and be assigned to multiple groups for that matter, based on their role, they're getting access to the fields and the data that they need as part of their job. And it is down to the field level access control specifically. Yeah. Great. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'll show just a couple more things on mobile, and then we'll continue to field some additional Q&A. While we're in our work orders here, a couple other things I'll mention. I'll bring up a PM here just for a simple example. I can do simple things like a start-stop timer. So when I start my time on this work order, it's automatically adding a line item for labor based on who's logged in and who's doing the work. So we do have that ability of auto creating that line item cost for labor without having to actually manually do anything. As I'm performing my work right now, it's tracking my time. If I was to hit stop, it actually auto creates that line item for my labor. A couple other things, I could actually see that pin right here. I can actually click a pin, have it bring up where it's at on that floor map as we showed earlier. So using those CADs, using those floor plans, actually pinpoint where's the work order, where's it actually at. A couple of other areas I'll mention. We also can leverage things like adding itemized costs. So those itemized costs could be parts, it could be labor, could be for non-inventoried parts. So if you have items that are non-parts, I can just enter the costs associated with that. Other areas as well. And if I needed to do a purchase order request, I can do that as well. So as part of my cost, I can actually identify if it's a purchase request, and that's going to auto trigger a purchase order request back to my financial system, whether it's Oracle, SAP, Lawson, or Great Plains, and others. So we can automate some of that processing of purchase orders as well. From an attachments perspective, we actually can take photos. So we actually can bring in a picture if we want to capture a photo of the device that I'm working with. We can also capture electronic signatures. So if I wanted to actually sign off on this work, I'll go ahead and do that here for the demo's sake. I'll actually sign off on this piece of work and save that, and it attaches that right to the work. So I'll just save my name here. There we go. Great. So just a few additional feature sets there. Any other questions? I guess the last thing I can mention is we can also go back, and if we wanted to, we could also convert this to a clinical work order. So I mentioned earlier we can transfer between groups. A couple other things on this, not only can we transfer this to another group within mobile, I could even convert a PM to a corrective with a click of a button as well. So if I find there's a problem associated with this device while I'm performing my PM, I can create and automatically bring over the fields associated with this PM directly and create a child relationship between the PM and the corrective if there's a problem as well. So I just want to mention that in case that's a use case you may run into.
Okay, we have got one question. It says, any cybersecurity functionality? We sure do.
Yep. So as part of our solution, we are also dealing with cyber. It is a cyber platform as a whole, meaning we actually have it supports both facilities and clinical use cases. The most common is clinical right now. That's the main area that we're seeing a lot of traction in. Designed for threats like the WannaCry vulnerability that I think everybody saw last year. We are tied into two of the main vulnerability databases, the National Vulnerabilities Database, along with the Common Weaknesses Enumeration Database. And we interface with other medical device discovery and security solutions like Zingbox and many others that allows us to actually automate that data that's coming from those security solutions and determine, is this device affected by one of the vulnerabilities, and now automating the remediation, meaning automatically notifying the appropriate technicians or teams, along with creating the work orders associated with that remediation within the environment. From a medical device perspective, we track a number of data points around the device, whether it's IP enabled, what's its IP address, MAC address, also other details associated with firmware version, being able to handle things like hardware level identification, software level identification, and application level identification. So yeah, we have a separate module specifically designed for the security elements that exist within a hospital, dealing with some of the cyber threats that are coming in related to medical devices specifically. Great. Any other questions coming in as we're going?
I think we're okay at the moment.
Great, great. One last thing I'll show while we have time. As we mentioned earlier, that call center capability also have that ability to locate technicians in the field, being able to figure out where technicians are actually at. I'm actually going to bring up a call record for a moment and just show how that actually operates. So maybe we have a caller coming in from a call center. So we talked about call center consolidation, that children's health example. One thing I'll show you as part of our call center module, again, this is out of the box and comes with the solution, is I can actually identify what the problem is. So maybe I need a technician on site. We'll save this for call record. A couple of things that we developed in this space was also the ability to locate where and what technicians are available. So at record, I can actually see the caller, what they called about last, what assets are they in the environment that they're working in, the service history associated with the asset that they're calling about, but also being able to actually locate where this particular item is at and be able to actually find technicians based on who's available. So as a call center, I can route it right to a technician, but I can also locate technicians where they're at geographically related to the asset. So I'm working with facilities right now. I could also find clinical techs as well in the field. What this is doing now is actually looking geographically where my technicians are, and our mobile application I just showed you is automatically reporting back current latitude and longitude locations for that particular technician. So here I'm at this particular work site, and I can see that this technician is physically closest to this actual piece of work. So we can actually leverage this geographical mapping as well for locating the technicians that are available to actually work this piece of work. Again, saving you time in terms of travel time. You'll notice that I'm actually here, it's where I'm physically at right at the moment. So I'm actually not too far from this piece of work. Again, that's the value there is reducing travel time, costs associated with wear and tear on your vehicle, and ultimately getting a device back up and running faster. Where we see hospitals leveraging this are cases that you don't have dedicated techs in the building. So your urgent care sites, your surgery centers, maybe your minute clinics, et cetera, that don't have dedicated staff. If you have technicians driving out in the field, being able to locate those technicians is incredibly valuable, and being able to dispatch that work to the closest technician that may be out in their vehicle or on the road. Questions on that?
Okay, Ben, I have actually got a couple of questions if I can just butt in. One question is, can test equipment be required to be loaded during a PM work order?
It sure can. We can actually require that the test equipment being used identified on the work order itself. We have the ability to identify that. And to us, the test equipment is a serialized asset, right? So that you can do things like reverse traceability of that, meaning I want to know all devices that have ever been calibrated or tested with this piece of test equipment. We support, by the way, pharmaceutical customers. We just did a webinar just before this with Vertex Pharmaceuticals, and they're leveraging it for that exact use case of being able to identify what test equipment's being used. It's a Fluke meter. We even have a Fluke integration as well. So I'll just mention that really quick, that we do have a native integration with Fluke that allows us to actually bring in those meter readings directly into the system as part of performing that test, and also identifying what Fluke meter you're using as part of performing that test. Just one example. We can also look at other testing equipment if you're using other systems than just Fluke.
Okay, and I've got another one. It says, can you show us the available reporting, also the different ways one can look at assets, list, view, recorded view, and also can you edit in all views?
Sure. Let's kind of take those one at a time. So we walked a little bit of the reporting. If there's a specific report that you'd like me to walk through, I'd be glad to do that. So as I mentioned, the dashboards and reports, and the way these work is we actually set up dashboards for each of the key roles within your organization. So your employees may have a dashboard that's published out on self-service, so we provide data out to them, but also your technicians will have their own dashboard. Your supervisors will have a dashboard for things like understanding your resource scheduling. So typically we set up a dashboard for each of the key roles that'll be interacting with the system. Once we set up that dashboard, we're then going to be setting up those key performance reports. So if I'm looking at, I'm managing all my planned maintenance scheduling, I may be looking at resource loading. I'm going to see my dashboards and reports relative to my role in the organization. So these are a few examples of dashboards and reports. Certainly send in chat if there are specific examples you'd like me to talk about in more detail. But again, we have, like I said, over 100 facilities, 100 clinical reports specific to each line of business. The second piece of the question was around looking at our asset inventory. So I'll talk about that for just a minute. Within our facilities module, also within our clinical module, you'll notice that we have this inventory option right here on the left-hand side. This allows me to track all of my equipment, but also my parts. So we have a full parts inventory management as well. And if there's any questions around parts, around stock rooming, around replenish thresholds, around automation of that, we do have that ability. We also interface with systems like PartSource and others. So if you do parts ordering through other systems outside of an internal stock rooming system, or using Grainger or other systems, that's an option as well, and being able to interface with those parts ordering systems as well. But let's look at equipment for a second. I think the specific question was around looking at asset inventory data. Let me go ahead and bring open an asset record here. I'm looking at a facilities asset record in this use case. So here I'm actually looking at a device. And the click to configure architecture is incredibly powerful. So if I wanted to change, if I'm an administrator, a facilities admin of this application, or a clinical admin, I can actually right click and configure this with a right click rather than having to call a vendor or supplier. If I actually wanted to go into the designer here, as I could actually do that with a right click, and I can actually drag and drop where are the fields on the form, what fields do I want to expose, and who do I want those to be exposed to. You can actually do that visually with our visual graphic editor that's native to the platform. So here I'm in, I can actually drag things around and modify in real time. Once I save this, it's actually updated for the people that have this view, and they can actually look at these changes in real time across the platform. So very powerful, click to configure architecture. But again, hopefully that answered that question. A couple things we'll mention while we're in here is my inventory data has a lot of fields. You'll notice if it was network connected, we talked about that earlier. Where is it at? I can see it on an actual map. Where is it physically at? Barcodes and serial and asset tags. We also do things around asset classification. On the medical side, we actually classify back to either ECRI or we help classify back to the FDA's UDI, Unique Device Identifier Standards. So we actually have a native feed from the FDA on a daily basis that allows you to classify your medical devices back to that. So a couple areas that I'll mention that we support to help you with that asset classification process. A couple other things I'll also mention. We do track financials around your devices. So meaning I track all the labor that goes into supporting a device, any parts or materials, it's under contract, what are the contract costs. So you can actually watch the total cost of ownership of the device. The value here is now I can actually watch cost of service ratios, so you can start making repair versus replace decisions against your devices. So if this device is going to cost me over $6,000 in this case to repair, I want to be able to actually make a decision, do I repair this or do I actually replace the device? So some of the common use cases there around our financial tracking, and that's automated as part of work order management. As line item costs are added, it's automatically rolled back to the asset. Same is true for availability of a device. So we track uptime, downtime, fault counts, mean time between failures. Some of our customers want to actually use mean time between failures for things like risk. If it's failing more often, I want to raise the risk. Also, I may want to address that, right? If the device is failing very frequently, I may have a problem and I need to get that device out of service potentially or replace it. So just a couple other automated metrics that we're tracking as part of our asset inventory and asset data. Any additional questions there that I can answer? Oh, I'm sure that's probably sparked a few more questions from the team.
Yes, yeah. I am with an independent service organisation. Can this be utilised with multiple facilities for work orders, PMs, duty?
It sure can, absolutely. Yeah, so we have some of the largest healthcare service providers that are customers of Nuvolo, GE Healthcare, Siemens Healthineers, and others are leveraging Nuvolo globally to support and service their healthcare customers. So yeah, absolutely. We support both providers, but also services organizations as well that may be servicing these environments specifically. And from a contracts perspective, our contracts module allows you to track those contracts, whether it be your end customer contracts back with the hospitals, but also your vendor contracts as well. So we actually support from a contract perspective, understanding what's covered, what's the entitlements, what assets are under contract, along with all the key details of the contract itself. Yeah. Hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah. Does Nuvolo integrate with, utilize the FDA GUDID database?
We absolutely do. Yep. So our FDA feed absolutely brings in that data as well. So we actually bring in the FDA data. So you'll notice that right here I'm in our FDA UDI part of this data, and we pull in all the GMDN data. So for for example, Siemens Healthineers uses GMDNs globally because the FDA UDIs aren't in some of their international sites. So GMDNs are absolutely part of our feed that we pull in as well. In addition to being able to pull in ECRI classifications, if you're a subscriber to ECRI, we can bring that data in as well to help with that classification, but also the automation if there's a safety and recall alert, for example. Hopefully that answered that question.
Okay, a couple more. Does this system tie in with any device manufacturer to automate recall data or product updates?
Yep, and that was kind of, yeah, absolutely. That's part of the last statement I made there was we tie in with ECRI and RASMAS are the two main feeds that we tie in with. We leverage our customer subscription to those. And then from there, when those recall alerts, so let's look at our recall section, when those alerts actually occur, we actually can bring those feeds directly in. So within clinical and facilities, both have safety and recalls. But when those alerts come in, so if we get one from ECRI, so these are two ECRI alerts that came in, we can automate the detection of the devices that match the alert and also allow you to automate the creation of work orders for those alerts that come in. and allow you to ultimately track that full life cycle of that safety and recall. So now you know, here's the recall, here's the details associated with the recall, here's the devices impacted, and here's the remediation we took associated with that recall. So we absolutely can handle that as well.
Okay, and does the mobile app work in an offline mode and update when back in cellular Wi-Fi range?
It sure does. Let's so yeah, absolutely it does, it works both online and offline, as I mentioned. Let me just bring this back up. Right now, you'll notice I'm connected. Since I'm tethered right now to get this connected here, I'll actually go into airplane mode here and just show that. When disconnected, so I'm in airplane mode right now, no connectivity. So let me actually turn off Wi-Fi as well, just to show that. Don't have Wi-Fi on. There we go. Okay, let's go back in. So I'm in a, let's actually go out of here. So notice right now, you'll notice the top bar, I'm in offline mode. I can keep working just like I was working in online mode. So let's go back in. I can look at my asset inventory, my work order inventory, my PMs. I can process PMs. I can complete the work. It timestamps it as I do it. I can put my stop timer. I can do all the work as if I was online, but in a completely offline mode. And as soon as I regain connectivity, you'll notice at the bottom there's a little synchronization icon. It's going to auto push and pull that data back to the server with the timestamps of when I performed the work. The value there is you can truly work in any situation. You do not need connectivity to continue doing your PMs or inventory data or make changes as you're working in the system. Very powerful feature.
Okay, when attaching a photo, signature, etc., will Nuvolo display all of the attachments pertaining to that asset under one window, or would you have to look into each work order where you place the attachment?
Okay, so yeah, so depending on where you're placing the image, so if you want that image to show, first of all, if you're wanting to look at all the attachments, you can actually look at it from the asset level and see all the work orders that have attachments and actually look at each of the images that have come in one place. But if it really depends on where you attach the images to. So if you're attaching the images to the asset, they're all right there in one view. If you're attaching the images to the work order, they'll all still show on the work order specifically. So it really just varies depending on where you place that attachment.
Okay, and another question here. Do you have any risk formulas for assets?
Yep, we sure do. And we actually allow customers to adjust those risk scores. So we have risk scoring that's configurable both for facilities and for clinical. So you can set up your risk scores. So you can define your functions, your physical risks. You can define your maintenance requirements associated with it, and the point scores associated with each of those. And then from here, you can actually leverage and build your own. We can actually build, or you can build your own formulas. These are simple mathematical formulas based on the risk. And that, as I mentioned earlier, could include things like mean time between failure. So you'll notice here is the simple formula that's being used. So I'm looking at the RFC function score plus the physical score, etc. Is giving me my overall point score for that. So if you want to change or modify, it's truly simple click to configure, changing and building your own formula. So we absolutely have that ability to set up your own risk scoring. And you can leverage that as part of your AEM inclusion formula. So if you're using alternative equipment maintenance formulas in your hospitals, you can actually leverage, obviously, your risk score as part of that formula in most cases. Yeah.
Okay, and can it auto assign in order the work orders to the tech as the work orders come in?
It sure can. So we have the concept of, there's two different ways of routing work. So we have this concept of automated assignment rules. That's the simple way of routing work. And just to show you how that works is a very simple way of routing work. And then we have a more advanced way. So in this case, I can filter on asset type, model, department, location, asset, work order type, and any combination of these. The more granular wins, meaning it will route based on the more granular decision. So if I want to route all, maybe I want to route all my, what do I have? CTs, maybe. I think I've got a few there. So if I want to route all my CTs of that particular model, I can route it to a particular assignment group, and then from there have it assigned to a primary, secondary, tertiary technician and auto-escalate based on response or acknowledgement. That's one option. And we have a much more advanced way using what we call templates, which allows you to truly route work based on any condition. And that condition could even be geo-fencing, for example, of where technicians are. Some of our customers are leveraging geo-fencing to route work. So if I'm in a physical geographical area, route all work orders to me based on where I'm currently at, latitude and longitude within a particular radius. So we have a number of ways of routing work, to the most advanced of geo, to the most basic of based on asset type model to get work to the appropriate assignment group and appropriate technician. Yep.
Okay. How is equipment in the AEM program identified? By individual piece of equipment or by classification?
Well, so you're actually setting up a formula for your AEM inclusion, and once that formula is defined, it's down to the asset, what assets are under that formula. So if I was to look at a piece of equipment, let me just grab one under the formula here just to show it. So let's look at an AEM simple. I'll look at a simple formula here. Let's grab one here. So I'll look at a particular formula. This is using a point score. Here's a set of devices that are under this particular formula, which, by the way, you can attach your rule set for how these devices were determined that they can fall under this. Joint Commission requires that, obviously. But down to the asset level, I'm looking at the asset right now that's in this particular formula. You'll notice it's flagged as under AEM, and it shows on the asset what formula is being used to allow this to fall under AEM. And then from here, I can drill back into that formula and the documentation associated with that AEM inclusion formula specifically. Hopefully that answered that question.
Okay, and another one here is, how can you validate the information enter on offline app cannot be duplicated by another technician using the online app at the same time?
Yep. So the mobile application does a conflict resolution. We have an entire conflict resolution process, meaning a technician actually gets notified, and one will win, but you'll have a decision on who wins. Who wins, meaning the online entry, and it's a field by field level update. So if the online update was a different field within the same work order, you're allowing both of those updates to occur with no conflict. But if it's the exact same field that's being updated by two different technicians, one offline, one online, there's a conflict resolution process, and you make a decision. Does the online tech win? Does the offline tech win? Or is there some sort of a consolidation between the two? So that's something we'd usually discuss during implementation, because you can make that decision who wins, offline or online, or is there some other conflict resolution you want to use? Yeah.
Okay, I think that is it for the moment. If you want to continue with your presentation, we will jump in if we get any more questions.
Great. I know we got about 4 minutes left. I definitely would like to continue fielding. Most of the presentation at this point is complete. I just wanted to appreciate all the technical questions. Hopefully I was able to steer around here and show you more of the platform. If anyone's interested in other areas, please let me know. I'd be glad to show some of the other areas we didn't touch on, like Space and Move, or some of the other facilities modules that we didn't get a chance to jump into. If there's interest, just send that in chat. Be glad to show that as well.
I have actually had another question then. Can you replace TMS or mainspring?
Sure, yeah, that's one of the most common we run into. Yeah, TMS 4 Rivers, mainspring, AIMS, even some of the IBM Maximo, Archibus, there's a long list. The TMS 4 Rivers is the most common application we're running into that we are transitioning. And we actually have a transition solution to quickly migrate the data from TMS, since it's the most common that we're migrating customers off of. So we do have a quick migration process for that in terms of moving your data from TMS to Nuvolo, asset data, parts data, work order data, etc.
Okay, so do you have customers that used IBM Triega? Sorry,
sure
if I mispronounced.
Yeah, we sure do. A large health system. We've got a couple large health systems that actually moved off of Triega onto Nuvolo. So yeah, Triega is another application that we are moving customers off of. Yeah. Great. Well, we'll keep the line open for another 3 minutes. Andrew, I'm not sure if we have any other items coming in as well from your side.
Okay, I have a couple of other questions. Before we wrap up, which facility software can you replace?
Sure, and we covered quite a few of those already, so I think that we've covered most of those. If there's any others that you would like me to clarify on, but there's quite an extensive list. TMS 4 Rivers, like I mentioned earlier, is the most common. IBM Maximo is another, AIMS another, Metamizer is another. As I mentioned, there's quite a long list, but those are probably the most common, as I mentioned.
Okay. Well, just to let attendees know, The questions we didn't get time for today, I will be sending to Ben, and he will obviously answer at his own convenience. So I do apologise that we didn't manage to get to quite a lot of the questions, but thanks once again, Ben, and obviously thank you again to today's sponsors, Nuvolo. One lucky attendee will win an Amazon gift card for completing the post-webinar survey. Details will appear on your screen shortly. You must complete the survey to obtain your certificate of attendance. If you don't see the survey, please email us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. And for more information about our upcoming webinars, please visit our website, webinarwednesday.live. Thanks once again for everybody attending, and we hope to see you again next week. Have a great day.
Thank you all very much.